Thanks so much, and thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Jenna Pilgrim. I'm the CEO of Streambed Media. You might have heard my talk on that yesterday. I'm blessed to be joined by these two dashing gentlemen to moderate our conversation on protocol wars today. So it's obviously this is a exciting, somewhat sometimes contentious space. So it should be a good conversation. So thanks so much, guys, for joining us. So I want to start out, can you each give us a little, probably about 60-second overview of your product and how you fit within the sort of protocols stack, just for our audience?
Jenna, thank you. I'm happy to be here with you as well. My name is Sean Walsh, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of a company called HyperBlock. Now, we don't technically have our own protocol. We're a mining company and a software development company focused primarily on the Bitcoin networks. But by the virtue of the fact that I've got a lot of customer acquisition experience throughout the years, I'm coming at the protocol discussion from the perspective of the benefits and the opportunities and the risks and the challenges of customer acquisition, and less so from the technical aspects of it. So that's a little bit about my background. I guess I started mining back in 2013 and have sort of made my way through the industry ever since. So I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. Also very happy to be here. I'm Maxwell Sanchez. I'm the co-founder and CTO of a company called VeriBlock, which we started about 5 years ago. And actually, as Justin, my co-founder, said yesterday, we met, the initial core team behind this project met at TNABC 5 years ago here in Miami. So it's an exciting little reunion for us. And a little bit about what we do. VeriBlock is a blockchain, and we invented a new consensus protocol called Proof of Proof. And it's an additive consensus protocol. So what it does is it essentially reinforces any existing blockchain or any new blockchain that's coming out and allows it to harness the full proof of work power of Bitcoin to secure itself. So it lays on top of what you're already doing. It takes the blocks your miners are already producing and essentially backs them up to Bitcoin in an entirely decentralized, trustless, transparent, and permissionless manner. And I'm excited about this panel because we have somebody on the application side, Jenna, somebody on the side of the actual mining and conducting the protocol, Sean, and then someone who's actually working on designing new protocols and looking at how existing protocols fit together, which is myself. So I think it's an interesting mix of people up here.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much, Max. And I think we'll dig into that a little bit. So obviously, if we have this protocol stack, there are different roles that different parties play in it could be security, it could be storage, it could be what has kind of been your attitude towards partnerships in the protocol space? In how do you sort of vet which different protocols to work with, or how, that sort of protocol selection process? Do you want to just give a little bit of an overview?
Well, sure. Thank you, Jenna. I'll kick things off. We haven't been involved in too many partnerships. I guess one of the things that I forgot to mention in my introduction and personal bio is that I also founded a venture investment company called Redwood City Ventures, and from which I've made various angel investments in the crypto space over the last number of years. But by the virtue of the fact that with HyperBlock, we're looking to participate in pre-existing protocols, hopefully protocols that have the highest probability of achieving some sort of critical mass. Because if we're going to invest the substantial capital equipment investments into the data centers that we build out, into the mining servers that we purchase, into our substantial operating expenses, we want to make sure that the coins that we're getting in exchange for the mining activities that we're doing, or as I like to put it, the blockchain security services that we provide, we want to make sure that those coins are going to appreciate in value, hopefully, so that we can get a return on our investment.
For sure.
And so I started with Bitcoin Core back in 2013, as I mentioned, and we've certainly remained true to the Bitcoin ecosystem, incorporating Bitcoin Cash over the years. So I suppose you could look at that as some sort of a partnership, albeit a rather tense one on Twitter. But
the world doesn't occur on Twitter.
Pardon me?
Contrary, the world doesn't occur on Twitter.
There does seem to be some
Contrary to popular
disparity
belief.
between real life and the Twitterverse. I have to agree with you there. That's well said. So I guess to sum it up, we like what we see in terms of some of the, well, I guess if you look historically, you can look at some of the dual monetary systems that have existed throughout history, like the bimetallic monetary system incorporating both gold and silver. And when we look at Bitcoin, we now see a similar pattern emerging with Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash.
But then what do you think is the role, and I'll actually toss this one to Max, what do you think is the role of or an opportunity, I guess, for tooling to be built? So obviously you guys are building tooling on top of Bitcoin. You're building different people building products that integrate different protocols. So what do you think the role is for to sort of make the different tech that you're building? What do you think is the role of tooling organizations? So like there's, we've seen Block Daemon and Bison Trails and Block Cloud and like these other different protocols. What do you think is the role of those tooling companies?
I think something important there is modularity, being able to dissect a big blockchain project into all of its different components and being able to specialize, right? That's kind of how economies of scale have evolved and worked, and I don't think the space is any different. When we talk about protocols, a protocol is just a way to get something done. It's a way to basically, we try to overcomplicate it, but it's basically, I want to do X, Y, Z, and I want to do it reliably. What's the protocol? What are the steps that have to be followed? And blockchain technologies, you look at something like Bitcoin, it's just a bunch of protocols that people link together in a really intelligent way. And you hear people talk about, the Bitcoin protocol. Are you talking about proof of work, the networking and transport layer, the messaging, consensus, the scripting language? And so I think being able to take all those pieces and make them modular and being able to recombine them in interesting ways is something that, one, you get specialization. Like we can design a protocol that provides security for whatever you're doing, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. But then a lot of these systems that can orchestrate these together, like some of maybe the cloud providers who understand the technology and how the pieces fit together, or developers who know, what functionality is needed out of the system they're building and what pieces are what trade-offs they can make with what pieces are available to them that they can throw together instead of trying to create everything from the ground up. So I think looking at the different layers together and being able to dissect and decide how the different pieces play together in the ecosystem and then who's able to orchestrate those in the best way. And that's really where then the application layer can come in. You can start seeing end user adoption and people can actually use working, easy, accessible, reliable platforms.
Yeah, and I think in that same vein, if you're able to pick, not necessarily pick and choose, but if you're able to identify which specific areas you'd like, then you can make the user experience a lot easier. And we were talking before, just backstage, we were talking about the priority of customer acquisition. If you have traction, you then have everything. So if that's the case, then do you want to sort of address the customer piece of it? What do you think either large enterprises' roles are in participating in these protocols? Is the priority critical mass of users, or is it a couple of key users who then can anchor sort of the network? Do you want to talk about enterprise involvement?
I'd love to talk about the customer perspective and the importance of user adoption for a new and aspirational protocol, because I think that now putting my Redwood City Ventures hat on, I've certainly been approached for investment capital from a whole litany of protocols from A to Z, and one of the things that I always hone in on due to my pre-crypto work experience, which was largely focused on online customer acquisition and online marketing and product strategy and these type of activities, I always tend to hone in on how are you going to get your first N number of users? Because if you think about a protocol from sort of like a conceptual perspective, I think it's really a marketplace. And a marketplace could be eBay. A marketplace could be a social network. A marketplace could be a dating website. A marketplace is a nightclub. I mean, you need to have a certain number of men show up to the nightclub, a certain number of women, people that are interested in talking to each other, what have you. And if you can't achieve that critical mass, you may have the best technology, on the internet, but you just won't ever reach that point where your company is earning enough revenue, where there's enough density of active participants in the marketplace on the protocol. And so I think that the technology that many protocol companies have put forth is spectacular, but in the the history of technological advancement over the last, call it even 40 years, all the way back to the advent of, not the World Wide Web, but the advent of the internet. People don't realize, many, that there were competing protocols to TCP/IP, several. And many of them were well-funded, even government-sponsored and what have you, but TCP/IP won for reasons that sort of focus in on who started using it and how fast they achieved that adoption. And you can look at even non-internet related technologies. Look at, VCRs from back in the 80s. Everybody thought that, I worked at Sony for a number of years, and I'm pretty sure, before my tenure, of course, that they put out the first Betamax VCR, which was superior technology in a few different ways, but the alternating VHS, I guess it was, the alternating protocol won out because they got the right relationships with the studios. They got people to actually buy their product and use it, and the same rules apply today.
Yeah, and I think that I guess arms race, this protocol arms race, we're in a similar conversation now where we're people are trying to build new apps, and they're trying to pick and choose, and this modularity you were talking about, Max, they're trying to pick and choose what their priorities are and sort of rank what they would like the protocol to do. But obviously crypto winter was hard on lots of different companies. There were many protocols that either went belly up or the token isn't worth anything anymore, or they're it's a really long process. So I think, what do you think, Max, the role of consolidation has, or where do you, I would say, forecast? What do you see sort of coming out in the next 6 months in terms of consolidation, different projects that are working together with other projects?
First of all, just to address a point you made about the crypto winter and a lot of the projects that, the best technology doesn't necessarily mean, you have to go and get the user like you're talking about. And I think there's going to be a bit of a resurgence. I think, the space has gone through several experimental phases where you see, let's try all this and see what sticks. And then there's some good ideas that get swept under the rug. So I think there's going to be some resurgence of some interesting ideas. I won't name specific names, but I think there's some things that we're going to start to see have a little bit more of a comeback from the grassroots side of it. And I think the enterprise side is going to play a big role in dictating where some of the more permissioned or centralized solutions start navigating. And I think a lot of people now are trying to merge the two in ways that don't make a lot of sense. And so I think there will be more specialization where you start seeing, water and oil separate in that regard, and you start seeing some consolidation where the enterprise people decide, well, we really don't need that whole decentralized thing you guys are working on. We're like, well, we don't want to work with, And so I think you're going to see a little bit of a separation there. And I mean, that's why with what we're doing, we cast a pretty wide net. We said, we don't know what consensus protocols exactly are going to win. We don't know what blockchains people are going to congregate around, but we know they're going to have some common attributes, and what can we do to reinforce that bottom layer? Well, if you're going to build something cool, you got to have a strong foundation. You can't just start building a house on a mudslide. And so, what can we do at a foundational level? What kinds of technologies can we develop and deploy and start educating people about, so that when they build these really cool applications and these really cool houses and start consolidating, they have good options to choose from for that foundational layer they decide to build on.
And I think it's those priorities as well. It's like setting, okay, we're going to use Bitcoin for this, and we're going to use, could be Libra, could be Tendermint, it could be Cosmos, could be, there's these different interoperability protocols coming out. It's deciding really what those priorities are. So that was good. Sorry, you were going to say.
Well, I was just going to respond to the comment that you made about how we seem to be emerging from the so-called crypto winter, which we've sort of been in for coming on 2 years now, and to my eye, it seems that the herd has been adequately culled, so to speak, over the last 24 months or so, which is good. It's very healthy, like forest fire or this type of things, because what we saw prior to, Q4 of 2017 or ending at that period was we saw too many protocols. We saw because essentially every altcoin is a protocol unto itself. And do you really need a protocol for shining your shoes? No, you don't need a shoe shine protocol. There needs to be a certain degree of disparate software developers and marketing teams and participants that adopt a protocol that's already in existence that may be good enough, just like VHS was certainly good enough to provide the user experience that the customer base was hoping for, which was simply to sit on their couch and watch a movie. So I think that
Just goes right back to that user acquisition you were talking about.
Yeah, I guess, I hate to keep coming back to the same thing. I may sound like a broken record before this panel discussion is over, so apologies for that. But yeah, it's critically important. And I don't know what the high watermark in terms of altcoin projects was, but we can all agree that it was excessive, and it actually detracts from the resources that are being invested into the protocols that actually will make it over the elapsed time, the months and years as time goes by. We need to kind of huddle around some of these projects. There may be differences. Some people may not get along. Some people may have technical details that they would prefer to see handled in other ways. But frankly, and I've said this before at other conferences on various stages around the world, when you boil it all down, we're all working for the same company. And that company's name is cryptocurrency. We are trying to acquire users to the company called cryptocurrency. And yeah, we all have different departments and different responsibilities, but we're all going to succeed together. And so we need to combine our resources because, believe me, let there be no doubt that there are plenty of incumbent forces that, while we may not be overtly trying to threaten their control over various things, it's perceived as a threat, and there's certainly a good deal of backlash. So we need to be cautious and careful, and we need to work together.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's the you were talking about threats, and there's that clip that I'm sure that most of you have seen of the American congressman who says, Bitcoin is a threat to the state apparatus. Like, okay, well, it's taking away the U.S.'s ability to control the money supply. Like, well, yes, but how do we then? I want to talk a little bit about the integration of protocols in society. So we've seen, David Marcus hauled in front of Congress to talk about the Libra Association, and to me, that's only the beginning. There will be more and more protocols as there are more and more users, more and more people dragged before our typical traditional bodies who will want to battle test these protocols to ensure that they actually do what they're supposed to do. So I just want to talk a little bit about sort of dig into a little bit about Libra as well. What are your sort of opinions on how they're approaching their integration, their builds? It could be either of you. Do you want to just comment on, or even the community surrounding it as well?
Yeah, Libra is not an area that we really spend a lot of time focusing on at VeriBlock. We're largely looking at the decentralized part of the ecosystem. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking some of the technologies that we've built as part of this whole blockchain experiment and using them in different ways and seeing what sticks. There's a lot of experimentation left to do. But I think some of the narratives around how the technologies behind it are being sold, not even a lot of times by the people behind these protocols, but people who misunderstand what that protocol or that project is meant to do. I think there's a lot of misinformation about there. I think there's a lot of people who conflate projects like Libra too closely with the rest of the blockchain ecosystem in both positive and negative ways. Sometimes that could be good for regulations and regulatory approval. Sometimes it could be very negative and for both sides of it. So I I think a lot of that comes down to user education, user acceptance, what people even understand or don't understand about how these projects work. And I think trying to compare Libra to Bitcoin in a lot of cases is a little bit silly just because of the different goals that they're really trying to solve.
Well, and the roles of these large players in approving transactions, in participating in consensus, in playing this sort of validator role. And I don't want to get into a sort of proof of work v proof of stake v proof of proof v whatever.
And I think in that sense, a little bit, Libra is kind of a way for companies to try to take some power from governments and monetary approval. And do people want that? Do they not? I don't know. But it's not building a decentralized system. It's reallocating the power is more what Libra, I think, is going for.
Okay, I want to preface what I'm about to say with something that's pretty important. I see cryptocurrency as an expansion of the pie of how money can be used. So if you imagine a pie that's this big, which represents all the financial transactions that are currently conducted in the world, wire transfers, writing checks, sending a PayPal, using your credit card, giving cash to the gas station, those things are this pie right here. Cryptocurrency, to my eye, really shines not in replacing that pie. Cryptocurrency shines in expanding the pie. And by that virtue, it's not a threat to the pre-existing financial system. That's a very critically important point that I think we need to try to make clear to regulatory bodies and banks and governments that feel threatened by this. So now to my comment on Libra, because I think it's a fascinating case. I sort of quipped that Libra was the combination of a Trojan horse and misdirection and a gateway drug, and for cryptocurrencies, because they've got the resources, they got the visibility, and they're going to make the concept of digital money or cryptocurrencies, forefront in the minds of 2 billion people around the world. And people may not see it coming to the degree that they might want to.
Well, and at the end of the day, it goes back to we don't, whether Libra succeeds or not, that if it brings in 2 billion people to this decentralized world, however decentralized it there's obviously varying degrees of that, but if it brings in that many people, then it gives them that education on how to send money and key management and all of the other options that are available.
Exactly.
I know. Yesterday I was moderating a panel. And we talked a lot about the public's ability to choose, their ability to. I really like VeriBlock as a company because it gives protocols that exist in private or proof environments. You're able to secure things that happen in private environments in that public domain. So I think it's just a different way of thinking about things, where you're not trying to secure the actual information. You're trying to secure the fact that the information exists and it's valid and that it meets the qualifications that you want.
Yeah, there's a lot of parts where I do think the private and public sector can work together. Not that. The permissioned and permissionless parts of the ecosystem can really work together, where we don't need to. I don't care if Coca-Cola and Pepsi do a blockchain together and transfer whatever between themselves, and I don't care. But we know that Bitcoin as a basically the world's best utility of immutability, we know that can serve them some purpose, and why not be able to take fingerprints of what they're doing and back them up, and then they can pull them up in court. And that's an entirely different thing from what we're trying to design for public blockchains, but it's still a good use case of the technology and reinforces that what we're doing goes beyond just money or just decentralized finance. It's data integrity. It's our medical records correctly stored. Does someone have this authentication to this privilege to do this thing on this little microcosm of the global economy? And so I think there's a lot of interesting technologies there that we're just starting to see emerge, and that's kind of money was one use case of this.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of talk about how if Bitcoin has won the store of value game, then which protocol or which cryptocurrency is going to win the other ones? So, medium of exchange and all the rest, and that's how you get Bitcoin Cash. That's how you get all of these different either forks of Bitcoin or different protocols that emerge who play different roles, and I think
it's interesting to look at each of these protocols and really recognize what the differences are and how they can really work together. And I keep going back to this idea that you don't need, and sometimes you don't need the high security of Bitcoin to secure, a simple transaction. Sometimes a layer up solution can work better. Like you don't.
And our
need,
approach for that is basically, ultimately back up to Bitcoin because it's there, and in aggregate you can afford it. But not everybody needs to, as we say, live on the beach. As far as not everyone needs to be in that Bitcoin block.
Yeah.
We can do 1 million transactions back and forth in a, small little private whatever we're doing, and we can throw a fingerprint up to Bitcoin every once in a while to keep everyone honest. We don't need to expand Bitcoin as the bottom layer for everything.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we look deeply at protocols, and sometimes it's a little bit of overkill. You're like, you don't need your Lamborghini to go to the grocery store. Like your Prius will do just fine. So I want to, in our last couple of minutes that we have, I want to talk a little bit about, so that I know we touched a little bit on it, but infrastructure tooling. So obviously, if you guys are building software for Bitcoin, software that secures on Bitcoin, what other sort of products are you seeing in the market for this infrastructure layer to get that customer acquisition we're talking about? So what are you sort of most excited about in that area?
Could you clarify on tooling a little bit? Are you talking about frameworks?
Could be there's different companies emerging that do validating as a service, staking as a service, and cloud providers, and there's all of these different products that are coming out in the market. And I think right now for protocols especially, it's just it's confusing.
Yeah, I think from an end user perspective, a lot of people don't want to run a full node of every network they interact with. A lot of people, and so. And we talked a little bit about giving people the option to choose, right? Blockchain is really about what level of control over your own assets do you want, what kind of governance do you want controlling when and where you can send those, and not saying everyone has to run a full node of everything on their phone all the time. It's saying, I trust this person to run a full node instead of, that company or that government or whatever, and being able to choose who you trust and who you don't, and then act accordingly. I think staking services are interesting. It does increase centralization pressure, but at the same time, a lot of people don't want to hold their own crypto, and so I think that's one of it's a good reason to back up a proof of stake protocol with another type of consensus that acts as a check and balance. So you're not, people say, to attack proof of stake, you have to own 51% of the coins on the network. No, somebody has to control the keys for 51%, which is way different than ownership, and a lot of people don't see that nuance.
Yeah, do you have anything to add on tooling, infrastructure?
I don't think I can add too much to that. I'm duly impressed by the approach that both you, Jenna, and Max have taken to your sort of integration of pre-existing technology and even concepts into both your products. So I'm honored to be on stage with both of you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
And we are out of time. So thanks so much, everyone, for giving us your time and your attention. And we'll be around, I believe, for the rest of the conference if you have any questions to ask of us. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks,
Thank
panel.
you.